What's up, duelists? Today I've got a banger video. My voice may sound a little bit fried, but that's because I was yelling all night at Electric Daisy Carnival. Oh my gosh, it was a blast. Anyway, before we get into things, just want to say thank you guys for all your continued support. If you guys like this type of video, this is a little bit different, something than I usually do, then make sure and leave me a comment below or a like on the video so I know to make more of this stuff in the future. Anyway, this is going to be the top 5 budget decks for May 2024. Very exciting video because it means newer players have something they can get to compete with for cheap, and players who have been around for a while can maybe build another deck, a second deck for cheap, and switch it up a little bit, get a little bit creative. If you want to try out any of these decks in the highest level of competition, RBET stuff is coming up. RBET Online, June 8th, June 9th. That's quickly approaching. June 15th, June 16th, RBET Los Angeles, almost sold out. RBET New York, almost sold out. RBET Laurel, Maryland. Make sure you guys are signed up for these tournaments. They are selling out very, very fast. And I just want to make sure you guys have the opportunity to sign up before it's too late, basically. Anyway, yeah, definitely fun time. And these decks can maybe help you cut some costs on your travel fees, perhaps. Okay, let's get right into things. The first deck is DD Warrior Lady Dragons. This deck is incredibly strong. It recently won the Ultimate Time Wizard at YCS Rio, and it's had a few decent performances in RBT. Not many. Very underrepresented deck, honestly. So if you're a little bit of a hipster like myself, is Dueling Book really just going to do me like this? Is it really just going to do me like Rainbow Wheel of Death me right in the middle of a video? You've got to be kidding me. Oh, this is just classic Dueling Book. Anyway, I'll just keep talking over. Okay. Wow. That was a scary moment. Scary moment having to redo the intro. Oh my god. Okay, but we're back. Anyway, this deck is good. That's where I was. Strong deck, very affordable for the minimum rarity. Almost every single card in the main deck comes in a cheap or reprinted version except Trap Dust Shoot. This is going to be your big expense for the deck. Now, if you don't mind like a moderately played one, you can probably find one for about $12. So it's going to be the most expensive card in the deck by far. But one of the big saving graces to this deck is that you don't really need an extra deck, and you can like kind of save on a few cards if you just absolutely don't have them. One of the examples I was going to mention was Pulling the Rug. You could choose not to play Pulling the Rug and just play a second Trap Hole if you want to save a few extra dollars there as well, because I believe Pulling the Rug goes for about $3. So if you cut Pulling the Rug, then Trap Hole is a totally reasonable alternative. It works versus Monarchs seemingly well. It's not the best, obviously, but it does work versus Blackwings well, better than Pulling the Rug. So it has some strengths and some weaknesses compared to Pulling the Rug. But for the most part, it should cover enough to where you can save an extra dollar or two there. For the rest of the deck, every single card in this deck is either 50 cents or below. So that's pretty sick. We got a price estimate for it. The way this deck works, for those of you who are unfamiliar, is you try to find Future Fusion, which is an auto win card, or you try to Red Med plus Drago people twice for like a 2-turn kill type thing, or you can beat them down. It's just kind of a beat down. I want to say stun style deck because of the nature of Quackimera Drago. And it has really high power level because all of the monsters like Wyvern and Red Eyes are just really high stat lines and have great effects compared to the rest of the format. So really solid deck. I'd place it in a high tier myself personally. As for the total cost, it's going to cost you about $37.75, so about $30.75 for this entire deck, before shipping and taxes, minimum rarity, which is honestly incredibly affordable. I got lucky, of course, because I was able to pick up maximum rarity stuff before it got all pumped. But if you want to start tricking out your deck, you could probably get a really nice looking version of this deck for under $100 as well. So that's pretty cool. The fact that you can spend that much, and then the cool thing about Edison format is that it's an eternal format. It doesn't ever change. It doesn't ever have a ban list. It doesn't ever have a rotation or anything. So it's a one-time cost. It's not like modern Yu-Gi-Oh or any other modern TCG where you have to keep rebuilding your decks over and over and over again, based off of just ban list changes or corporate changes or whatever. It's It's just a deck, you build it, it's a one-time payment, and yeah, and you can keep tricking it out over time too. So that's pretty cool as well. That's my number one budget deck. Solid deck, definitely. If you're playing well, it'll take you to consistent top eights. All right, next budget deck, also very solid, is Lightsworn Christia. Now this deck is actually pretty affordable, shockingly. A lot of these cards come in common, and a cool thing about this deck too is if you're looking to pick up Edison format in the maybe not immediate future, but like in the next few months, the Light of Destruction set is getting a reprint. So you might even be able to get nice cards of this deck, like Ultimate Rare Lilas, Ultimate Rare Celestias, Secret JDs, etc., on a budget, which is going to be really, really sick in the very near future. So definitely something that is cool to look out for. Now, this is a list that's like a combination of a bunch of lists that have recently top aided, but this is the same general idea for every list. You try to summon Judgment Dragon, and then you try to summon Christia, or you just try to summon Christia. Christia's the best boss monster in the format. It was recently reprinted in Valiant Smashers, and the low rarity versions of Christia are going for as low as 1 penny on TCG Player. So you can actually build this deck very, very cheaply. The most expensive card in the main deck is going to be Herald of Orange Light. This card goes for about $4 a piece for the lowest rarity. So that's going to be the biggest part of your spend, is $4 each on Herald of Orange Light. Now the extra deck, it's a little bit lacking in the current budget state. There are some cards you can add to make it a little bit more expensive. The first of which is Avenging Knight Parshath. This card has not yet seen a reprint. The lowest rarity goes for about $20. The next card is Ancient Sacred Wyvern. You can make this card using Cyber Dragon and Herald of Orange Light. It's a very, very strong synchro. It allows you to go for big OTK plays. Definitely comes up, but you know, it hasn't been reprinted, so it's a little bit out of the budget range. And then Tempest Magician is probably the first card. Well, Tempest Magician and Magical Android are the next two, but Tempest Magician is probably the first card I would try to pick up because it actually comes up very frequently with Plague and Lila, or Herald of Orange and Lila, to go for game or to discard copies of Fairies or Lightsworn names to get your Christia or your JD live. This card is incredibly strong in this deck, and it comes up very frequently for me when playing this deck. So even though it is a little bit out of the budget range, I would definitely try to see if you could budget for it. And Magical Android is just a card that hasn't been reprinted yet, but you could also include, it's just like an alternate synchro. You can't really make it that easily. You only ever make it with Necrogardener, Arcus, or Lumina, I guess Card Trooper too. Well, I guess you can make it kind of easily, but you don't really need it. You have a 5 in Ally of Justice Catastor. You could play this exact list and easily top 8 a major tournament. It wouldn't be that shocking. Those 4 cards are just like icing, really. The main game plan, the main core idea of this deck can be executed without those 4 cards. And if you are building this deck without those 4 cards, it ends up being around $32 total, minimum rarity, before shipping and taxes. So assuming you're like a regular tax average in the United States, it's probably going to be around $35-$40 for this entire deck, which is really, really cheap considering I would place this deck very high tier. I would place it like tier 1, solid. Same thing with the Dragon deck as well. These are both, in my opinion, tier 1 decks, like decks that you could take to a tournament and expect to have good results as well, as long as you're playing well. So yeah, really, really cool that you're still able to build affordable Edison decks, and a lot of that is thanks to these reprints. The reprint of Archlord Christia was very nice. The new Light of Destruction reprint is going to be very nice for finding extra copies of these cards, even though you can still get commons of these cards for pretty cheap. Super Nimble Mega Hamster also getting some reprints in the near future. Right now, it's going for about $2-3 for a common. So even though that's not like a ton of money, it's the fact that you can get it for even cheaper in the near future is really nice. We shouldn't be spending arm and leg for, just being able to play the game. That's really silly. And I'm pretty happy to say that Edison format is still affordable despite the popularity growing, thanks to all the reprints and stuff. So that's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. Also, if you do want to swag this deck out on the low, the Rarity Collection 2 is coming out soon. And while the set was a little bit lacking, in my opinion, it does have some cool ones in Charge of Light Brigade, Raikou, and Hamster. So you can get some maybe tricked out, pimped out versions of those on the low, because Rarity Collection 1 made some very swag cards affordable for very cheap. So I expect Rarity Collection 2 to be similar to that. All right, the next deck is another kind of unpopular deck, but a deck that I consider to be very high tier, and that is going to be Chain Burn. This is going to be the most affordable deck on this list. I think this deck is very strong. This is a list that's based off of a list that a duelist by the name of Frog Slicer created. He utilizes Jester Confit with the Cyber Valley. Confit? God, French people. God damn it. Just make it say the thing it's supposed to say. You know what I'm saying. Anyway, Jester Boy plus Cyber Valley to draw cards. And then once you've drawn enough cards, you try to chain together some big turns with Chain Strikes and Secret Barrels, and just deserves to deal 8,000 points of damage. This deck is an absolute blast to play. I actually think this is one of the most fun decks to play in Edison format, contrary to popular belief, and I also think this is one of the most fun decks to play against in Edison format as well. It's really skill testing. It definitely tests your game knowledge and your opponent's game knowledge, and it approaches the game from a totally different angle, but not in an angle that's uninteractive and unfun, but just in an angle that's like kind of like back and forth in a unique way. And I think that that's such a fun shakeup. If you're someone who has like a Blackwing deck or like a Frog deck or something, and you want to try a totally different angle on playing the game, or if you want to test your skills or your game knowledge, I think this is definitely one of the decks to improve yourself as a player. I love this deck. I think it's a lot of fun. I think Frog Slicer absolutely knocked it out of the park with the main deck. I've made some changes to the sideboard. I do like having Breaker, Space Typhoon, and Heavy in case of Royal Decree. I actually hate Royal Decree. This deck hates Royal Decree as well. It's got 26 trap cards in the main, so obviously Royal Decree is going to be an issue. You got to have a bunch of outs to it post board. And then I like to go with a lot of like just beat down cards, because I don't think siding more burn cards is that necessary. Compulsory can help you deal with Prime Material Dragon if people have it. Brain Control, similarly, can help you deal with Prime Material Dragon. It can also act as a pseudo burn spell. Cyber Dragon and Sirocco can help you once your opponent sided out their Deep Prisons and Bottomlesses in game 2. Caius is a massive 3,400 point burn spell in a lot of matchups, and it couples well with the Brain Control and the Cyber Dragons, as well as the 3 Battle Faders that you do main. And then Gores is just a really strong card. One of the biggest draws to this deck is that you don't really need an extra deck. Actually, you just don't need one at all, except for 3 Chimera Tech for the Machine matchup. And so that makes it so this deck is incredibly affordable. Everything in the main deck costs 25 cents or less. So really, really low cost deck. I believe the total pricing after or before shipping and taxes for Chain Burn is about $16.50 for the entire deck. I went on TCG Player. I filled out the carts with all of these decks. These prices may change in the near future. People buying out stuff, certain things changing, but I don't expect them to go up or down more than like $5. There's just very little chance that these cards get bought out, any of them, because there's so many printings of them, and they're pretty easy to find. The most expensive card in this entire deck that is going to be running you about $2.50 a piece is actually Caius the Shadow Monarch. The lowest rarity of this card goes for about $2.50, $3. So pretty affordable deck. This card eats the bulk of the cost. It's like literally half of the cost of the deck is buying 3 Caiuses. I believe my math is correct here on the Chain Burn stuff. Yeah. A lot of these cards cost you less than 10 cents, which is awesome and super nice. All right, moving on. Budget deck number 4. This is a really fun deck. I can't recommend this deck enough. I know it gets a bad rap, but because people think burn, and then they think, for some reason, they think like alt win, but this deck plays a lot more like an aggro deck than it does like a burn deck or a combo deck. It's pretty interactive, like, you know, like cards like Dust Tornado, very commonly played cards. Cards like Solemn Judgment have really interesting interactions with this deck overall. So I think it's a cool strategy, and I think it's definitely slept on. All right, budget deck number 4 is Hero Beat. This is a different kind of Hero Beat than the ones we're used to seeing. This does not have Deep Sea Diva in it, as to save on the prices of having to play this card right here, Magical Android. This deck, it plays more like a stun deck, And we've seen decks like this have a lot of success in the past. Most notably, I believe ProStorm took it to his first RBET top 8. Very similar deck list to this. Few cards different. He was not playing Elemental Hero Prisma and Snowman Eater. I believe he was on some number of Royal Oppression in the 55, but I've cut those and the Trap Dust Shoot as to make this a budget alternative. I do not think Royal Oppression is necessarily the best card for this deck. It conflicts with the 3 Miracle, the Future Fusion, the 2 Cyber Dragons, and the Call of the Haunted. So having Royal Oppression conflict with 7 of your cards in the main deck is not ideal. I'm going to be honest, 8 if you count Starlight Road as well. I just don't think it's ideal. I think Skill Drain does basically the same thing for this deck, and it works really nicely with the fact that you just don't really need your monster effects. You just summon a big boy, use Captain Gold to get over even bigger boys with the Skyscraper, and then spark your way to victory. It's a fun deck if you like eating sandpaper. I actually don't really find this deck to be that enjoyable, but if Heroes is your cup of tea, if you like to activate Miracle Fusion, if you like to activate Skill Drain and make things miserable and slow the game down to a snail's pace with cards like Hero Blast or setting multiple deep prisons or activating Shadow Mirror or Light Mirror and just saying neither of us are doing anything creative or cool, then this is the deck for you. This is as close as you can get to like a Floodgate style prison deck, I would say, in Edison format while staying competitive. Probably a deck that you will never catch me playing personally, but if you like the cards, if you like Absolute Zero, which is a very cool card, and if you like Elemental Hero Gaia, you just like playing these cards in general, and they bring you joy. Maybe you have an Ultimate Rare Skyscraper that you had as a kid you want to show off. This is a very solid budget deck. I think it's very strong, solid tier 2, tier 1.5 option. Definitely has the capability to top tournaments. Hero Beat has topped a bunch of tournaments. Specifically, this type of build has topped a bunch of tournaments. So, I think it's a totally fine deck to build. Now, this deck is a little bit more expensive than the previous ones, but it's still in that sweet budget range of around $40. Absolute Zero is going to be your most expensive card. The minimum rarity is going for about $7 a piece. You can maybe get away with playing 2 if you can only afford to play 2 and pick up the 3rd when you top your first tournament with the winnings, but definitely I would recommend trying to get the full 3. The next most expensive card is going to be Gemini Spark, which goes for about $3-4 each for the minimum rarity. So for the total cost of this deck, it's about $42.30. You can upgrade this deck, like I said, with Trap Dust Shoot and Royal Oppression, but each one of those is going to put you out of my opinion of a budget range, which is around $40. But yeah, $42, it's still very affordable, and this deck is strong. If your locals is filled with Blackwings, this deck does really well against Blackwings. I think this type of build actually does pretty well against Fairies as well and Lightsworn. So if you are dealing with a lot of Lightsworn decks, the Skill Drain Light Mirror the Hero deck is going to be very good at dealing with that. And Gemini Spark, Hero Blast just really put in a ton of work versus other aggro decks like Blackwings and Glads. This deck does tend to struggle versus combo decks. I think it's pretty weak to things like Vayu Turbo, which is like an OTK deck. I think it can be weak to things like dragons. I think it can be, well, not dragon, regular dragons like DD Warrior Dragons, but it can be weak to like Dragon Turbo, for example. I think this deck is very weak to frogs. It can definitely struggle in that matchup as well, because even under Skill Drain, repeatable 2400 monsters is very difficult to deal with. But if your locals has a lot of the matchups that are good for this deck, then definitely a solid budget option and a cool second deck to have built if you are a player who's already got their primary deck built and wants to dabble in something else. Why do I have Prisma in here? That is a stupid choice. Let's cut that. I'm just sitting here like realizing that Prisma doesn't send anything because we don't have Terra Firma. Normally you would play Terra Firma. I don't know how expensive this card is. If this card's like 50 cents, you could just add it to the extra deck and up the cost and keep the Prisma. But if you can't afford Terra Firma, which is totally understandable, just add a second Snowman Eater to the main. It's just an extra water that does well. Alright, And the last budget deck I have for you guys today is one that I have taken an oath to never play ever again. It's Gladiator Beasts. But Gladiator Beasts is an absolutely mediocre, I'm just kidding, solid. It's totally a top tier copium deck that you can take to your locals and go X2 drop every single week. I mean, and top, of course, guaranteedly, because it's a top tier meta deck. Gladiator Beast, top tier meta Gladiator. You hear those words oftentimes not in the same sentence or in the context, open quote, Gladiator Beast is not a top tier deck, close quote, but that's just the doubters, all right? That's just the haters. Don't let them get to you. Don't let them get to you. You can build this deck on the low, and maybe you can win the cost of the deck back with your first tournament win. Now, I'd be surprised if that happened, but you could totally do it. I mean, it's possible. I don't want to say it's impossible. This deck is fine. This deck is solid, but I think this deck shines in just being fun. It's a good time. It's always fun to like tag out your boy, bring out another boy, get a cool effect. All the Gladiator Beast monsters have like really tight artwork. They look awesome. The Test Tiger activation is always fun. Activating Rescue Cat is always fun. Gladiator Beast looping with the War Chariot is always fun. I don't know, this deck's just sweet. It's a good time. The main deck is a compilation of decks that have had success in recent history. One Prisma, Rescue Cat, Icarus Attack. These are all cards that have been in successful lists. Now, Gladiator Beast has only ever topped one RBT, and it topped recently with a very unconventional list. I do think that unconventional list played to its strengths. That's why this deck has like a whole bunch of one-ofs. It's kind of hard for your opponent to play around things when you have like 16 one-ofs. They're just playing a constant guessing game. I think that goes a long way when playing a deck like this. The sideboard has some interesting options here. Sirocco for the Blackwing matchup. It also helps you turn on your Icarus Attack in a pinch, which is nice. 2 DD Crows. I actually think this card is pretty strong in Gladiator Beast. Even though you have Ready Ari, which is going to be your most expensive card, extra graveyard removal can be very useful versus zombies and frogs in particular. But it can also help you in some really niche, weird, unfair matchups like Norlaris or like Christius Warren or stuff where you just need extra graveyard removal on top of the Ready Ari. So that's nice. It also helps turn on your Icarus Attack in a pinch. So I think that that's a cool inclusion that I don't see enough players playing in Gladiator Beast. And then, the rest of it's fairly standard besides this pole position card, which is kind of a meme, but it's a cool card. Extra deck, fairly straightforward. Most expensive card in the extra deck is Geyseris. You can get some pretty looking Geyseris for about $3, which is cool. And I've actually factored that into the budget for this entire deck. The most expensive card in the main deck is going to be Gladiator Beast Ready Ari, and that's going to be running you about $12 for the minimum rarity. Unfortunately, this card has not seen a reprint. It is kind of a choke point card for this deck. If it were to be bought out, not saying you guys should do that, it's deplorable to buy out Gladiator Beast Ready Ari. It could easily change the affordability of this deck from like affordable to slightly less affordable, but probably not too much less affordable because I pity the fool who has a bunch of Ready Ari sitting in his binder. Anyway, this deck as it stands is going to run you about $41.75. But yeah, it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool deck. It's a good second deck to have built. I actually built it recently. I've got it sitting around. Will I ever play it? No, because I've taken a solemn oath to never play this deck ever. And it will never happen. You'll never see me play it ever, never in the future on this channel. And if you never want to see me play Gladiator Beast in the future, make sure you're subscribed so you can tune in when I don't play this deck inevitably in the future. Anyway, guys, thank you for tuning in. A little bit of a chill video here, a little bit of a chill budget build vibe video, but we'll be back with more regularly scheduled content after Electric Daisy Carnival is done destroying my soul. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.